So look, I'm very mindful of the fact that there are a number of people who don't normally sit at the back of the council chamber. So I'm going to move to item 13, public notification of the provisional local alcohol policy. Yeah, so Jamie Goff's, look, I doubt that we're going to get to another item before we break for lunch, Jamie, so you can go if you want. Yeah.
Early pass.
Early pass.
I'm happy to move the staff recommendation on that item.
Great. And do I have a seconder? And Tim Scandrett. So that's moved and seconded. All right. Now, would you like to present the report? I know that we've kind of been here before, and there is a comment that I want to make about the timetabling of this. In fact, why don't I just do the timetabling bit? Because, I mean, I'm the reason that this wasn't publicly notified at the time that we became the council. Probably, I think it was originally brought to us in early 2014. So, and the reason that I was not happy with publicly notifying the provisional local alcohol policy at that time was because it would have put us at the front end of the appeals process. And because Christchurch is in such a state, I mean, we're in a unique state in the country. We're still rebuilding our central city. We still have provisions in place that are quite unique to our city. There's the development of bars and other licensed premises in ways that would never have been imagined prior to the earthquakes. One, because they wouldn't have been financially viable. I think there has been an element of windfall in outside the central city that simply wouldn't have happened otherwise. There have been restaurant licences that had licences till 3 a.m, but actually but actually they were always closed before 1 o'clock in the morning. But replacing restaurants with kind of nightclub type bars, the licence already existing to 3 a.m, and there you see how the problem has kind of been developed. But the last thing that I wanted to do was for Christchurch to kind of be in the precedent-setting environment of the appeals process before anyone else. This should have come back to the council just before Christmas, but unfortunately the person that was kind of working on it left, and I overlooked bringing it back. So we've now got it back. I think we didn't give enough notice to councillors. A few weeks ago when we put it on the agenda, it came as a late paper. We've learnt the lessons about late papers, so we've been we put it off, and we took it out of the long-term plan hearing process. So now we've got some clear air, and that's why it's back here. It's been instructive to me to read the report that we've had on the appeals that have happened around the country, and that's also what I wanted to do, was to have a clear understanding of how the now I'm going to get this wrong, the Alcohol Regulatory and Licensing Authority has made decisions, and what I've been encouraged by actually is the knowledge that once the provisional local alcohol policy is notified and appeals are lodged, that a number of organisations have met with the local council in order to see whether there is an ability to resolve the issues that are between them. And I think that has been of great comfort to me, because it seems that the Alcohol Regulatory and Licensing Authority, or ALA I think we're allowed to call it, would in fact approve an agreed position, even if it was different from what was publicly notified. So that to me gives us great hope in the view that any outstanding matters that can't be resolved in terms of the views of those that might appeal can be resolved in that process. So I'm very happy that that this is now being, hopefully today at the council, being publicly notified, and that we will be able to be in a position ultimately to provide certainty in terms of development and the connection with community. Now, and I'll just lay this one on the table, because this is where I did take some advice over the last time that we put it on the agenda and then deferred it. During the district plan review process, we had a concern raised about the potential for the independent hearings panel to change some of the rules that are not covered in the local alcohol plan. So I guess that what I would signal, given that we have no ability to amend it at this point, what I would signal is that if that were to be the case, then we would need to be looking at an amendment to the local alcohol policy once it's implemented. But of course, we will have conversations with various interest groups in relation to that before we would proceed with it. But I just wanted to kind of put that on the table, because there's an element of uncertainty that exists around that, and it is particularly relevant to communities that have an expectation that there will be certain hours of trading limitations that are protected by the district plan, and I'm worried that potentially that protection could disappear, and that's the 11 o'clock one within so many metres of a residential area. So that's just a general introduction in terms of those comments. Is there anything that you would like to comment on in terms of what we're doing here now by way of process, and then we'll open it up to councillors?
Well, I guess I would like to start by saying that the provision for local alcohol policy is a very new one. It was brought in by the Act, and it recognises the local community's desires to be part of planning for licensed premises in their communities, the hours and their locations. And that's new, it's very new, it's quite different from the previous legislation. And it allows councils to have, provide strategic oversight of things like hours and locations for premises. And it provides important guidance for the district licensing committees in making their decisions. You will know from reading the report and previous letters from the chairs of the deal cells within district licensing committees within Christchurch City that they are very keen that council gets on with having a local alcohol policy. At present, they feel that they have no community guidance on, which would assist them to making their decisions, to setting the hours, for example. And so, this is, and I would also like to acknowledge the enormous contribution of the community to this, preparing this LAP. The stakeholder group, in particular, which was pretty well there from the very beginning, which included industry and health and police and a number of others, and certainly there wasn't agreement about what should go on in our local alcohol policy, but there was certainly agreement that pretty well universally that the Christchurch should have its own local alcohol policy, and there was tremendous goodwill and real listening, to everybody's perspective. So, a lot of time and effort, and it was really rewarding to be part of the process, which I felt, and I want to acknowledge Adair Brewerton, especially, of course, Alan Bywater, but especially Adair, who really provided the leadership with our engagement process. I think it was superb. So there's only one recommendation and that's to essentially for council to agree that it wants to move forward with the provisional local alcohol policy and to notify it for appeals. So I think that's all I really want to say at this stage.
Thank you. I did notice that there were more submissions for the local alcohol policy than we got on the entire long-term plan. Phil.
Thank you very much, and thank you for a very full report over something which is always contentious. The history of Christchurch shows that, and hopefully we can get a resolution today. And I'm urging councillors strongly to support the recommendation that in fact we now notify the local alcohol policy. I make my comments as a former health professional, where I guess I spent a lot of my time as a psychiatric social worker putting band-aids over this whole problem. And I think that the local aspect and having the community involved in a plan now gives us a chance to really start addressing the root causes, which clearly is a culture of heavy drinking and binge drinking. I also want to give the last council full credit for all the work that was done as well, and the councillors here, former councillors at the table. And the staff have pointed out how, in fact, when the consultation happened, that in fact there was general agreement that a local alcohol policy was needed as a tool to actually reduce that whole problem of, so in fact that we could achieve the aim of reducing alcohol-related harm and all that entails. And so really, though, when I referred to changing this will help change the culture, this is sort of like getting this kind of local bylaws in, or lead to bylaws, allows really that culture to start to change right at the bottom, because people have been involved. And there's no doubt too that clearly the government organisations, they were quite clear of the support for a local alcohol policy. It'll be a useful tool. So other things, comments I'd make is that councillors will have received a fairly late letter really from Dr. Ruth Spearing on behalf of the Canterbury Hospital medical staff. I draw her comments to your attention. Ruth and Anna Stevenson represent over 500 health specialists in Canterbury. And what they told us, I think, really was reminding us of what they said at the submissions that we heard last year. And they referred to the cost of alcohol and alcohol damage in our city being $90 million a year, and the impact on the health services, including mental health, which is clearly an interrelated problem. Not only do we have addictions, but we have the impact of people's addictions on other mental health illnesses and disorders. And they're really clear too about the evidence from, for example, Australian cities like Newcastle, how in fact earlier closing times has led to a significant reduction in crime and assaults. And they also pointed out last year, and I want to remind councillors of what it's like, for example, in the real world. If you work in the emergency department at Christchurch Hospital, you'll recall they showed us pictures of people with broken bones, disfigured faces, children assaulted by their parents, and of course we all know about the horrendous impact of motor vehicles accidents and the link with alcohol in those cases. And they also reminded us that in terms of some of the impact of that, more than 50% of the spinal injuries at Burwood Hospital are directly linked to alcohol. So overall, there's no question that the plan is a very good document. It's not perfect, but overall it's very good. And I'd certainly urge councillors to support it. Thank you.
Any others? Andrew, then Ali.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly keen to see this piece of work proceed. I obviously looked at the options in the report, and the only two options that I would be considering would be option 1 and option 3, and obviously going back and doing all of the work again that has already been done, albeit some time ago, isn't an option that I would prefer. So I'm going to be supporting option 1, but I guess with some small reservations. And I'll put my comments in the context of Littleton, as I often do. I support having a local alcohol policy, and I don't want to hold this up. But as I say, I'm aware that the public consultation in particular was done some time ago. I mean, 2012 was 3 years ago, 2013 was 2 years ago. There have been some big changes, both in terms of stakeholders, people running businesses in that time, and there have also been some big population shifts and people moving in and out of various suburban areas, city centre, and also in and out of the city at that time. And as a matter of process and as a matter of principle, I think it's important that everybody has a chance to have their say, including those people who are residents of the city now who weren't in 2012, 2013. And that's why I'm particularly interested in the comments that the Mayor made at the beginning of the meeting around ways that that can happen. There's a particular issue, in my view, in Littleton, where the document we've got in front of us today proposes 1 a.m. closing. And in my view, the future economic development of Littleton and the future success of Littleton in terms of its town centre and what it's able to offer as a point of difference in the future is likely to be around entertainment and hospitality, food and drink, theatre and all of that sort of thing. And there is a view, certainly among some in Littleton, that 3 a.m. closing would be more appropriate. That recognises the fact that Littleton has in the past been and will in the future be an entertainment hub, and that at 1 a.m. people aren't going to necessarily want to jump into a taxi and visit a precinct in the central city rather than continuing getting on with what they're doing at that time, as I understand it, in a harmless way, in a way that has happened for many years without too much in the way of difficulty. So my understanding of the process for people to get involved in making those views heard, given we've got to where we've got to, is that they can obviously appeal to ALA through the process going forward. I'm certainly encouraged by the Mayor's comments that organisations have met with the local council through the process to make amendments or make changes. And certainly I'm keen, if we are seeing issues coming up that perhaps we didn't hear when we consulted on this the first time around, that we are able to quickly move to make amendments once we get to adopting this policy in the end. So I will be supporting option 1 because I believe in the direction of travel, and I think this is something that we need to be doing. But certainly make it known that I will be, as the local elected member, working with the local community to make sure that they're aware of the steps that they can take so that we get the right outcome for Littleton. And I'm not saying that Littleton's necessarily unique in this regard either, but I do refer to it because it's the area I'm most familiar with.
Thank you. Ellie.
Thank you. I'm not convinced that the alcohol-related harm is reduced significantly enough to warrant something as wide-ranging and as far-reaching as this policy. I think enforcement and education, host responsibility, personal responsibility, these are things that our city should be promoting. We're a city in flux. We have a shift work population. We have a hospitality sector as well, which is part of that shift work force. We're developing entertainment areas still. We're developing nightlife areas. Health issues that we face in this country at the moment is around obesity and fast food and diabetes. We have 24-hour-a-day fast food restaurants, so we're going to start limiting the availability of that as well. I think that there's a balance that needs to be struck between controlling this and offering people freedom and personal responsibility to make the decisions that they should be making. I am after hearing the Mayor's comments today, because I think that the major issues around my concerns that I've outlined can be addressed when we look at a review, and we need to look at the specificity that can be or needs to be looked at with regards to exceptions in location and areas as the city starts to change. I've seen a fact stated within our own paperwork actually that the reduction in alcohol harm as a result of this policy in place as is would be around 1%, and I don't think that that is enough when you look at the restrictions this does put in place for a developing city. So as I said, I'm happy to support it with the proviso and hearing from the Mayor with regards to the review that we do once it's in place.
Jimmy?
I support the staff recommendation to put this the provisional the local hold policy to the public notify, and the people still can appeal. Because these the whole process is open and transparent. I was last term the councillor. I'm also currently this term the councillor. I still remember, this one. I remember in mid of May, when the staff dropped this local alcohol policy, put to a public consultation, we received 4,060 submissions. And also we heard 168, either individual or the community group, business group, or some of government agencies, etc. We heard all of them, So we need to focus on the point is what's the purpose of this alcohol, the kind of local alcohol policy. You can see it's a minimize alcohol-related harm in the community, but it's not against the business. It's not against the vitalized economy of the city. And also, this kind of local policy is only in relation to the licensing. This licensing, we focus on there's a location, density, one-way door condition, discretionary condition, as well as maximize the trading hours. My understanding, we heard from the business people, especially in the central city area, if we review those map, we separate two different. One is a central city core, the other is a central city, the precinct, the surrounding area. But unique difference, 2 hours, up to the 3 p.m., up to the 1 p.m. And also based on the government agency, the information, in the more later, you drink the kind of the alcohol, the more serious the alcohol relating harm. And also this is kind of the diseconomics, external diseconomics, because the community society spend too much the cost for dealing with the situation. So my personal view, this provisional local alcohol policy is try to balance. So I strongly request the mayor and our fellow councillors support. Especially, I would like to acknowledge the former the chairperson of the planning and the strategy and the regulation, the Sue Wells. My understanding, she contributed a lot regarding to this policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim?
Are we asking questions or debating?
No, we're debating.
Oh, right, sorry. Sorry.
No, there wasn't questions because it's not a question thing. It's either for or against, really. Oh, sorry. Okay. David?
Thank you. Initially, I was probably leaning towards option 2, but listening to the discussion today, I'm trying to go with option 1. However, I am heartened with some of the comments that we've heard today, particularly with reference to looking at ways that we can work with affected parties to amend our LAP as we go along once objections have been lodged. And I'm wondering whether in our motion today we should acknowledge that. And I refer to the findings of the hearings panel. If we look at 14B on page 85, the hearings panel had recommended that a review of the LAP within 2 years or within suitable time frame be conducted on various matters. And I am sort of concerned at the moment that we have an LAP that was worked up almost 2 years ago now. It is quite pertinent to point out that more than a third of the existing council at the time took no part in it for various reasons. And we had 4,060 submissions. And of those submissions, there seemed to be a large focus on business work experience and the contribution that the industry gave to the city livelihood and lifestyle. And yet we have perhaps been a bit more severe on it. I also looked at point number 55 of the report, which said, whilst almost 15% of Have Your Say submitters wanted no changes to the draft LAP, the majority identified ways in which it needed improvement. Most commonly, there was fewer restrictions for unlicensed venues in the central city and in some suburban areas, which is a point that's been raised on a couple of occasions today. Andrew's mentioned it, and to a degree Ali. And more restrictions for off-licence premises. It's always been my belief that the hotel and hospitality industry in Christchurch have been very responsible, and they operate under a quite strict regime of legislation. Their licence, their livelihood is at stake if they don't provide premises with a responsible attitude. It's always been my contention that the biggest issue in the city is actually preloaded people that are coming into the city that are causing the problems. And in fact, I'm led to believe that in bars in Dunedin, there's 3 bars have closed, all owned by the same operator, because he got sick of turning away intoxicated people and ended up being a babysitting operation for those, and they'd spend a minimal amount of money. Recent statistics have shown a marked decrease in binge drinking. And so I think what I would like to see is the adoption of our LAP, but in addition to the staff recommendation that this council commence a review of the LAP should a number of objections to the LAP be received. I believe that we are still evolving as a city. We are still establishing areas of hospitality. We have some hospitality areas that are outside our current structure, and that what we've actually formulated almost 2.5 years ago is appropriate but needs some fine-tuning. So I would like to...
David, I'd have to take advice on that. I believe that would be out of order because we can't anticipate the appeals being lodged. So I think that staff would come back to us if there was...
can we actually
we can
signal that we wish to immediately review the LAP?
No, there's no need to do that. What we need to do is to give everyone a degree of certainty, and that is not going to come about until we actually publicly notify and have the appeals process dealt with and a decision agreed. But I think that staff are getting a very clear understanding from across the council that that we are very willing for the for a collaborative approach to seeking to resolve any outstanding issues during the process. Yep.
Just a legal. I just wanted to clarify that about who has the right to lodge an appeal, because not everybody can lodge an appeal. Yeah. It's only a person that made a submission that may lodge an appeal. If you don't lodge a formal appeal, you can still apply to the chairperson of ALA and seek leave to be heard, and the following people can do this: any inspector, any constable, any medical officer of health, any other party who made a submission. So you could still say you want to be heard, but you're not appealing the policy. And any other person who satisfies ALA that he or she has an interest in the proceedings apart from any interest in common with the public. So you would have to have some sort of special interest. So it's not general, it's not open to everybody.
I understand that.
ALA. Yeah.
But the point is that in 2 cases already, the there was an agreement reached that Arla approved.
Yeah,
Yes, so
that could definitely happen.
Yeah.
So
Once
that's-
the appeals process is underway.
Yeah, that's right. But it's once the appeals process is underway. So I don't want to signal anything beyond that. I thought it was appropriate to mention the district plan one because the rules affecting the district plan are different from the rules affecting this. This is about harm reduction. The district plan is about nuisance. Nuisance for neighbours, having people slamming car doors and generally behaving loudly in a residential neighbourhood. So I'd be concerned if the district plan rules are affected, but I'm just signalling that if they are, we have to review this to see whether it provides some protection. But the rules for protection are quite different, so it may not be able to be anticipated. And I guess I'm mentioning it now because there are parties in the room that might want to be submitting on the district plan because that is an issue that is of deep concern to all of us. But anyway, we will. There's Paul and Glenn.
I want to see a really vibrant city for our young people and for our older people, and I think it's really important that we apply some balance. And with that said, we've got issues where we have residential areas right up against some of these other areas, and that is a concern. We want to see 20,000 people living in our central city. And so that's where the balance really needs to come into play, in my view. And it's about certainty. So it's certainty for not only the residents, but certainly for the businesses as well, who are wanting to establish themselves. So when we're creating these new areas, these businesses will have certainty of what their hours of operation will be, and they can actually then adjust their business model to suit. So I think that's really, really important. And on the other side, from the residential, as we're building new residential areas in the city and in the central city, those residents have some certainty about where and what time these operations will be operating. So if you're a young person and you want to live in the central city and you don't mind the noise to 3 or 4 in the morning, well then you can actually go and live in those areas, and they will certainly be provided for, but there will be others that do not want that, so we have to put that balance into place. And I'm really heartened to see there is an appeals process, and heartened to see that I think most people that will have a concern would have already raised it within the 4,000 submitters, so I think they'll all have the opportunity to actually put their case forward. And one thing in particular is the one-way door policy, which is, for me, a bit of an issue because what you have is a situation where you will dump all your people out in the street at 1 o'clock or 12 o'clock trying to get to a place where it has a later licence. So I'm pleased to see that that can be brought up through the one-way, through the appeals process. And in like with the Littleton area, to me it's not a centre, it's a port, and I think that it should have some flexibility there as well. So I will be supporting this. I want to give some certainty to all parties, and I think this policy will actually help guide that.
Glenn.
Thank you. I will be quick. I was here in the previous term, a similar length process to the LTP. In my view, wide views were canvassed. I've concluded that the LAP actually, as it stands, this policy is reasonable. As with Councillor Clearwater in my former professional life, often came across over the span of 20 years the effects of alcohol-related harm from generation to generation. We want to make Christchurch a fun place for our younger people. But my view on this is that too many freedoms isn't freedom at all. You actually do need a policy. You do need some certainty for our community. I feel within the policy that the hours are reasonable. There's more than plenty time to access alcohol, whether off licence or on licence premises. I think it's good and reasonable for the outer CD and the inner CBD. And there's a one-way door aspect on it too. I fully support we need to have that. I urge you to please support this.
Thank you. All right, I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you very much.